Hello, hello. This is the Harvard Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative take about the world around me. So my introductions. So feedback is important. It helps expand. It helps me know what y'all think about my show. Helps you for the future and so forth. So don't be shy. Get in there. Give me comments. Reach out to me, and I'll have those links provided for you. All right. So some of the platforms that I'm not on everything, but the major ones here, running a list for you. Is Spotify, Spreaker, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, just to name a few. So this episode is all about fashion from the UK. I'm going to give my perspective. I'm going to give my thoughts about it. And then I'm going to run down and give you the history. Here we go. Okay, so me personally, I'm specifying I should have said that. So I'm talking about UK is a umbrella term. A lot of different countries or so forth belong to the UK, but specifically what I'm focusing in on for this week, and then I'll go to all the other considered UK countries, in the following weeks. So now I'm focusing on England. So England for me personally, the fashion, street fashion, and specifically with 80s fashion. So in the 80s, I was a little babe. I was born in the 80s, in the later part of the 80s, but the English posh style stood out a lot in the 80s. And, with the mod 60s style too, those eras really made its own in England. And then also with punk rock. And so I'm going to talk about all those and then go into the history. So with the 80s, with the new wave sound, we get Depeche Mode, we get Simple Minds more Irish, but Simply Red, sort of. We get Pep Shop Boys. We get Wham. Well, Wham, not so much, but Duran Duran, and so forth. So the focal point, the way they were dressing, it was a lot of street, club, fashion style. And it set the trend for the way that the iconic look from the 80s is thought about, with that, oversized clothing, either gloss lips. Flock of Seagulls did it best with the unique style of how they fashion their hair and so forth. And so when we get to the 60s and 70s, the 60s is quintessentially from England, is Twiggy. So Twiggy, she set the trend, and she set the notion for the way, excuse me, I'll be right back. I got a tickle in my throat. I'll be right back. All right back here. So before her, a model, what was considered models of that time were social elite, social debutante, and, particularly not so youthful. They were, in between that age were like mid-20s or so. It was established that these ladies that were, of the fashion trend, of the fashion forward, of the model, it's established that they were women here. They were of age. And so we're talking about, back in the 50s and so, and at that staple in fashion, because in the 50s is when they started to break out into unique fashion houses. So, you got Givenchy, and Coco Chanel, so forth. They started to make an establishment of their own. So when we transcend from then to the 60s, you get a whole new different era of what was thought of as a model, or in Twiggy's case, a supermodel. So we get that whole aspect of youthful and rail thin sort of mentality about what is rebranded as a fashion forward look. And so out of this, we get that really tailored, polished, mod style look. And so, with the Beatles and with Twiggy, that industrial factory girl look, it was really established, and it was a staple of what is considered an iconic look, or what is considered the thought process when people think and reflect back and look at the 60s. Now, when we get into the 70s here, we get into that punk rock era here. And so, to me, again, going back to England, they really, they made that their own. So, from what I understand, and, y'all who are listening, correct me, and then my listeners in England, chime in on this too. So what I understand is essentially the punk era, the punk style, it was all about outcrying against establishment here, and making social commentary about the city life in which they were living in at the time, and the elitism from working class to middle class and so forth, and in the aspects of going against the monarchy, particularly when Margaret Thatcher was in rule. And so out of this, we get a reprocessed look of rock, what is thought of about contemporary rock. So we get people, wearing, and with that mohawk look, we get people who like punk rock, using safety pins in their clothing and so forth. And so this really grounded itself, and it made its own in the 70s. And for the most part, it's a staple of what a lot of people think about when you get into the mid to end of the 70s, because that was the time when rock was becoming more and more popular, and people were going away from the masses of popular music and then going away from the aspects of disco. Now, there's a theory that says that with the disco era, that was a racial issue, with the aspect of people couldn't handle the flourishment of the mainstream mentality of African American artists, being at the forefront. But I just see it like this. I just see it that disco isn't for everybody. And people were wanting something new besides what was, you know, put out there in the mainstream. And it's just that the whole era, that whole mentality, which people should really think about. You know, I'll give a really good example of this is public school system. Unfortunately, most public schools, now there are really good public schools out here in our country, in the United States and so forth, and expand out to international sense, where they understand a cookie cutter mentality of educating people doesn't work. But for the most part, it's unfortunate that's how the public school system runs, is a cookie cutter mentality that one sort of philosophy of teaching somebody is the way to go and forget everything else. When that's not in reality, because everybody's different, everybody learns at a different pace. So I think, on the outside looking in here, I think that's something to consider with the aspects of all the transformations that was going on, and the aspect of music and sound at the time during the mid to late 70s. All right, so with this said, I'm just going to end and straight tell y'all the historical aspects of fashion from England. Here we go. All right, so of course this link will be provided for you in this episode here. Okay, so it reads as it's from futurelearn.com. And so I'm going to go into the broad strokes about a timeline of British fashion history since 1880. And so I also wanted to say about this aspect of, this reminds me of the Victorian era here. So that was very a staplement that came from English, the English mentality of being genteel, proper, lady. You get cotillions here that translates to here in America, about being proper and very etiquette and polite. And that's another staple that is brought and pulled from England and the turn of the century, around the Gilded Age, that people associate that style and that mentality of Victorian era, and that's another staple of English fashion. Okay, so now, all right, so here we go. It says, so keep in mind that this is, I'm paraphrasing from what they're saying. Say, keep in mind that British fashion was influential and culturally important well before this time. So fashion changed through the centuries, spanning medieval England, Tudor times to the Victorian era. So British royal fashion played a large part in inspiring wider trends, something we can still recognize. And they go off a list with all the way from Princess Diana to Kate Middleton. So, however, to explore the entire history of fashion will require a very long article. So they're overstepping that. So the 19th century of fashion. So the end of the 18th century saw the modernization of clothing for men and women. So men still wore tailcoats, but they were shortened, and women still wore corsets and gowns, but with a slightly more natural silhouette. So the clothing industry in London expanded as materials and dyes came forth on boats from Cornish to British Empire. And this, along with the popularization of the home sewing machine, allowed for more freedom and bolder clothing designs in the post-Victorian period. So we're moving on to the 1900s. So we can see that the corset is still fashionable for women, particularly S-band corsets that push the hips back and chest forward was very popular. So, you get that Coke bottle look. That's very at that time, that was considered very aesthetically pleasing to the eyes. So the hips, back, and chest forward, as I said, has been alongside with frilly blouses with lace or ribbon, which was in the embellishment of that. So separates were also becoming common as an alternative to dresses. So men generally wore three-piece suits with hats, so they can see that British fashion during this time was still rather formal, without much room for self-expression. So in the 1910s, this was when you got World War I, and with that, everything changed for British fashion. So people had to become more economically restrained, which that makes a whole lot of sense. When there's time of war, you have to ration what you got, so you can't be allowed. Even the affluent is affected by this, so you have to take what you can get and utilize what you have. All right, so in this led to the simplification of clothing into something cheaper and more practical. So the role of women experienced a huge upheaval, and they started to work on farms and factories as part of the war effort. This meant that their clothing became more military inspired and practical to suit the work that they were doing, and dresses also became simpler and looser. And this was even more apparent and more of a staple of the masses of what we think when we look back in time in the 1940s in the U.S. with women going in the workforce and everything, and wearing more managed clothing because the war effort the young man, the anywhere from the husband to the son to brother, they were all off in the war, so they had to, hold down the front. All right, 1920 fashion. One of the most famous decades of British fashion, the Roaring '20s, began with everyone feeling a sense of prosperity and freedom after the end of the war. So fashion became inspired by Art Deco architecture and golden features. And influence was taken from ancient civilizations, and enthrallment with ancient Egypt followed the discovery of King Tutankhamun, or also known as King Tut's tomb in 1922. So gone was the military dress of the previous decade, but some of the practical features of clothing stayed with men and women wanting to feel comfortable even while they partied. Women often wore flapper dresses with dropped waistlines and ornate decorations, and men started to play with more colorful suits and bow ties. Moving on to the 30s and 40s. So the 30s was the most popular for women's silhouette for the change of that, and more androgynous shapeless flapper dresses to more silky, form-fitting evening gowns, often with a low back. So decorative hats and collars were also popular at this time. So for men, the three-piece suit dropped even more in popularity, being reserved only for formal events. So casual clothes such as knitwear and open necks and tops were more popular for day wear. So in the 40s, they're going through World War II here. So the UK government even issued to utilize a utilitarian scheme that lists a set of regulations on clothing to reduce the amount of fabric used. So both men and women wore outfits that mimicked utilitarian uniforms. Going on to the 50s and 60s here. So in the 50s, this led to styles for women as a dress and a cinched waist, a very skirt made famous by Christian Dior. And there we go. And then we get into the Teddy Boys and the working class with the rebels without the cause here in the 50s. So in the 60s, with both women's wear and men's wear were becoming more casual than ever before. And I was saying that more youthful look, playing with that. So playful colors and materials became more popular with designs using fabrics like polyester, acrylic, and PVC. Regarding men's wear, things had never looked more different. Clothes were more playful and more colorful. Trousers were wider and skirts were printed. There was also more of a blending between men and women's fashion. So we're going on to the 70s and 80s. So 70s was highly playful and explorative, a decade for the UK, with numerous styles being adopted. This included a hippie boho style with dye, bell-bottoms, prairie dresses, and croquette becoming popular, for all of which were a part of the movement moving away from mainstream fashion and politics. And I was saying about the punk movement, and I'll explain that. We get that. We get menswear keep getting more bold and more colorful, and more printed skirts and blazers becoming mainstream alongside increasingly slim-fitting trousers. So, we get this Mick Jagger look. He and David Bowie here. They really made a staple of that. So, 80s. So, they're saying that it's understated was not a theme of the 80s, but some of the most popular trends considering off-shoulder pads, power suits, and bright lycra sportswear. So denim also became more popular than ever in this decade, with denim jackets and skirts becoming common alongside classic jeans. Similarly, men's and menswear consisted of a lot of powerful dressing and sportswear, including tracksuits and windbreakers. So 90s and 2000s. 90s fashion became more casual than ever, with both men and women favoring jeans and oversized clothing. So sportswear, we get the active wear as, everyday wear here. And then 90s, and that transcended a lot into the United States fashion here. Sportswear continued to inspire fashion, with items like biker shorts and big sweatshirts being popular trend for women. So men also were increasingly inspired by the grunge movement, like Nirvana, with flannel shirts, jeans and Converse shoes being common. Hold on just a minute. Yes, baby. I'll be right there. You gotta wait on me, okay? I know. I'm doing something right now. I'll be right there, okay? I know. I'll give you a hug. Come here. Let me give you a hug and just... Okay? Let me finish. All right. Here you go. Let me wrap up here. Oh, my children. I love them so much. Don't want to spend too much time away. All right. So this 2000 fashion, this was the time that fast fashion started to become pervasive in the UK and other Western cultures. A lot of clothes started to be inspired by celebrity culture, and they were made as cheaply and quickly as possible, ready to wear clothes. So Y2K trends such as mesh tops, wide leg trousers, and bedazzled t-shirts were popularized and were currently seen as a resurgence of these cycles. So by the late noughties, now naughty is a slang term in the UK, y'all, who in England, y'all know what I'm talking about, for saying this era of the 2000s. Okay. There was even more fashion experiments. So some trends were inspired by the 80s, such as neon and geometric patterns. Some most popular noughties trends was the UK, including skinny jeans, Ugg boots, and chunky belts. So 2010s to fashion today. So in the 2010s, this decade was when things started to change, and the fashion world had continued to see a total upheaval on how fashion is worn. So designed and marketed ever since, with the rise of social media influencers, culture, and eventually sustainability and eco-friendly fashions. And they've seen significant changes throughout the industry. There is still some notable trends for this decade worth mentioning. However, from festival styles with fringe and flower crowns to millennial pink, everything in between with that, to the rise of the trainer, fashion has constantly been on the move and will continue to be seeing trends from previous decades being recycled. So British fashion, as of today, the movement towards sustainability, minimalism, and wearing good quality clothes has continued since the end of the 2010s. However, the fast fashion empire has also continued to rise, so they're now seeing the tension between these two approaches in fashion in the 2020s. So you can hope that UK continues to be creative and innovative with their fashion and future endeavors. So I'd like to know what y'all think about the aspects of the UK fashion, how that transcends to other cultures, and how that transcends to American style and how they blend together. Reach out to me and I'll have those links provided for you in this episode. All right, so this reaches the end of the Harvering Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care out there. Bye-bye for now. Take care.